really happy to have Greg Penner today, the chairman of Walmart, in conversation with Professor Hau Lee. Professor Lee is an expert in global chains, supply chains. He teaches a global supply chain class, and I think it's a great combination for a conversation with the chairman of Walmart. So this is our second kind of big retail after hearing about Whole Foods, and I hope you all enjoy the session. Hal?
Thank you, Brian, and good day, everyone. It really is our pleasure to be able to have a conversation with Greg Penner. Greg is a very successful venture capitalist, also chairman of Walmart, but he's also on the board of many multinational companies like Baidu, Hyatt, etc. Today, we want to talk to Greg about the situation that he learned about from the Walmart perspective. One thing I should also mention, very proud that Greg is a GSB alum. So, good day, Greg.
It's great to be here. Thank you both to Brian and Hal for the opportunity during interesting times.
Thanks. I think most of us are very dependent on retailers like Walmart on our supporting our daily lives these days, being sheltered in place. I'm very curious, and some of the students have sent me questions ahead, that how could Walmart sustain itself during this very difficult time in COVID-19, like maintaining health for your workers who are at the store, as well as making sure the supplies keep coming. Yeah, we heard about this toilet paper shortage a while ago. So how can you sustain Walmart to be able to provide great customer service at this time, Greg?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd say, we're actually incredibly fortunate to be in a business that's doing well during these times. When you look at some other industries that have just gotten decimated, and we've had a long history of doing well during periods of crisis. So it's sort of part of our culture and DNA, and I'm proud of how we've executed through this. That being said, it's hard, and we're in a really difficult period. You mentioned the supply chain. I mean, just to give you some sense of what we've been dealing with, when consumers first started hoarding middle of March products, we sold in 10 days, we basically sold our entire year supply of water bottles that we had expected to sell. We've sold over 100 million extra eggs. In a 5-day period, we sold enough toilet paper rolls for everybody to have their own roll around the world. So the statistics are pretty astounding. So, in terms of the challenges, obviously keeping the supply chain running is a challenge. We're learning to work in a different way, like, just like a Zoom call. So our executives are all working from home, which is different. We operate in 27 countries, and we're finding there are obviously some similarities across markets, but also some differences with how every country is dealing with this. We've been working closely with the White House and the administration, as well as at state level on how to help with testing and other things. But specifically, your first question was on our associates, and that's what we don't actually call our employees, we call them associates. It goes back to when Sam founded the company. We look at all of the people that work in our businesses as partners. So with our associates, that's actually our first priority is how do we keep, we have 2.5 million people that work for us around the world, and how do we keep them safe? And so, we were one of the first companies to implement new PTO policies. So we've actually had 3 tiers of paid time off policy. One is just for people who don't feel comfortable working in this environment. We have a set of ways to handle that. We've got a second level, which are people who have been exposed or are worried about, the need to be quarantined. And then we have a third level, which are actually associates who have tested positive for the virus. And at each level, we've got policies to address that so that we can keep our workforce going and keep the stores open, but make sure that folks feel safe. And that's been our top priority.
Well, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I'm delighted to hear that, and we count on you and count on Walmart to have a very great shopping environment to support us. Now, you talk about the water being sold in 1 year's supply in 10 days. That's hopefully a transitional time, and you are able to catch up with the production and catch up with the supply so that we don't have sustained shortage. A lot of times people worry that will we have a sustained shortage of these crucial materials. We hope that this is a short-term disruption. Is that the case, that you're seeing more and more normal supply back and resuming hopefully then more of the standard situation?
Yeah, it's actually it's interesting. Yes and no. So yes, the items that consumers were initially hoarding are now, the supply chain is catching up with that. So that's, hand sanitizers are coming back, toilet paper, water, all those things. People can only buy so much and use so much. So those items, the supply chain is catching up. There's a second level, which are items that, with Chinese manufacturing being down for a period of time, there's certain categories that, patio furniture and some other things that just weren't manufactured that are more seasonal. But, for a lot of those categories, demand is down. And then there's a third category, which is the one that we're more focused on right now and concerned about, which is fresh meat and, the issues which I'm sure you all have read about in the press, because those fresh processing plants are having issues. This isn't just, this isn't us specifically. This is Tyson and Smithfield and others that are having a real challenge with their meat processing plants and safe environments and controlling the virus. So that's really the area that we're probably most concerned about at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you talk about making sure the supply line is also continuously flowing. Right? And these days, we read, this is mostly in the public press, that some students have raised the issue is that, well, are we working on preserving cash? Companies, not just Walmart, but in general, retailers are wanting to have a conservation of cash, so that we delay our payment to suppliers or we don't pay them and so on, which of course would hurt the long-term viability of the supply line. I wonder if you can just have a quick comment on that.
Yeah, I'll comment on one specific thing and then talk more generally. I know there was an article in the Financial Times maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, which was really an erroneous report that, we were doing some things that were affecting our suppliers in Bangladesh that didn't seem fair, and that's just not, it's just not an accurate article. I mean, if we have with any of our supply chain, our both private label as well as CPG companies that we work with, if we've got something that's in production, in process, those aren't, we don't cancel those orders unless there's some problem. There will be down the supply chain, there are certain categories where demand is going down, and that will impact manufacturers across the globe, which we're going to see everywhere. But we wouldn't be backing out of contracts that we had signed. At a general level, it's a good question, which is, do you focus on, during these times, do you focus on cash? Do you focus on broader stakeholder values? Again, I think it really depends on the industry you're in. I mean, if you're running a hotel lodging business right now or an airline, I mean, you're focused on trying not to go into bankruptcy. Again, we're a bit more fortunate in that our business is pretty strong, although it's different by category. But we also, as I mentioned at the start, we've got a long history and culture of when things get difficult, we say, what's the right thing to do? We did it during Hurricane Katrina, and We've did it with the Houston flooding and all that. And so all of our board conversations have been around, let's make sure we do the right thing right now, and that's taking care of our associates and our customers. And if there's some hit to cash flow, we can withstand that. A good example is we came out and we paid special bonuses to all of our associates in the U.S., which averaged $300 an associate right away when the crisis hit, and then we accelerated bonuses as well from that were supposed to be paid in actually early May. We accelerated those to end of March. And we didn't need to do either of those things, but our view was, our associates were going to be hit pretty hard, and we wanted them to, we wanted to try and blunt some of that impact if we could.
Well, thank you for setting such a good example of being a company that commit and be dedicated to associates, stakeholders, and the supply chain. Let's turn around and talk about, Greg, going forward. I think some countries are perhaps planning to get out of the COVID-19, the worst situation. We hope that California and the rest of the country may also start talk about the recovery phase. Many people say that retailing would never be the same, given that we have experienced the COVID-19 episode. What's your look at the future of retailing?
Well, actually, before we get to that, I think, when you and I talked before this class, I think there's a middle step, right? Which is, before we get to talking about the future, I think the question is, how do we come out of where we are? And part of, as you'd expect in my role, I talk to a lot of political leaders, business leaders, academic leaders, and I think part of the challenge our country is in right now, and other countries are in, is this has become somewhat of a binary question of do we stay shelter in place or do we reopen? And our view at Walmart is that this conversation should be more nuanced. There's not one right answer. I think it's going to be dependent on what geography you're in, what demographic you're in. Are you an at-risk group? We obviously need testing. That's the most critical thing, and we believe that's coming. But we think we, as a company, can help lead. And this is one of the things we've been working with the White House on, and our CEO actually chairs the Business Roundtable, and we're working on what's the right plan to emerge from this in the right way. And that can be, again, some of the PTO policies, providing the right PPE so that people feel comfortable in the workforce, having special hours when seniors might be able to shop but don't feel comfortable normally going into the store. So anyway, put that aside. I'll go back to the question that you asked, which is so yes, I think there will be some more permanent changes that come out of this, but I think it's more, I think there were changes that were already coming, and this has accelerated that. So our business has been, for the last decade has gone through dramatic changes, and the whole digital transformation is significant and has impacted all retailers. What's happened is since the virus, a lot of those trends have accelerated dramatically. And we saw it first we've actually got a large business in China with almost 500 stores. And so we saw it with our stores there, which was, we've got a large part of our business is actually grocery pickup, where you can place an order on an app or on our website and pick it up, and in certain cases have it delivered. And those types of ordering spiked dramatically, first in China, and then we're seeing that in other parts of the world. And that, we think, that transformation was going to happen. It's just happening, basically what happened in a month was what people were expecting to happen over the next 3 or 4 years. And a lot of that, some of that will ease off, obviously, once some of the concerns around the virus lessen, but the transformation itself is going to be a permanent one.
Well, thank you, Greg. So it's important for us to know that Walmart is leveraging your perhaps convening power to work with the governments and to work with other groups to help us to get out of this first the worst situation, right? So, and then after that, going forward, we hope to have a new retail format. Yes, but Walmart is already doing a lot with Walmart.com, and so do you see that as maybe an expanded version of Walmart.com? And what would happen to the brick and mortar stores? This is more forward-looking.
Yeah, I mean, we think there's always going to be a place for physical stores. There's a community aspect to it. There's a lot of people who like, they'd love to go to our stores. It's their, personal physical touch points, which seems strange right now, but in normal times, for a lot of people, that's something they really enjoy. A lot of people like picking out their own produce and fresh foods and those types of things. But our focus has been, well, we've got a pure e-commerce business. Our long-term focus has been on how do we leverage our 11,000 stores around the world to provide added touch points and experiences for our consumers. And we think these worlds are going to blend. And with Whole Foods on the phone last week, that's Amazon now, and Amazon, we're sort of approaching Amazon's world from our physical stores perspective, and Amazon is coming from the digital side and physical stores. And we believe long-term, a customer's not going to want to have to choose exactly how they want to shop. They're going to shop multiple ways, and that can be ordering in the store and having it delivered to home. If it's out of stock, it could be on an app, but having it, driving by their store and picking it up. So we think there's always going to be a role for physical stores to play. And part of that might be that they become almost more like part of the supply chain as mini depots, where they're almost like a fulfillment node that's part of the broader supply chain network. But and then we think stores will become, they'll likely become smaller over time. And even though we're not building many big super centers anymore, we're relocating some, but not many new ones. But the footprint that when we are doing them now, the footprint is smaller than it was when we were building a lot of super centers, 15, 20 years ago.
Thanks, Greg. I know that Walmart has always emphasized on ensuring that the supply chain is sustainable. So whether it's environmental responsibility or whether it's social, labor, compliance, and so on. So Walmart has always been a champion. Would COVID-19 currently, under a very stressful time, that you may say, well, we cannot push this as hard as we used to, or this is a chance for you to say, hey, if you're not on board, you won't continue to be our supplier. So how is this something still Walmart is concerned with when you have so many fires and so many things that you have to take care of?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for us, it's really no change. I think if we had sustainability efforts that we were doing to enhance the reputation of the company, then I think during this time we would back off on those. But everything we're doing around supply chain, we think makes us a better company, or around sustainability in our supply chain specifically, we think makes us a better company and more efficient over time. So, we've got really broad goals around emissions reductions, becoming a zero waste company, improving labor standards, and none of those things are changing. And I don't see us taking a step back at all during this time period. There might be some minor things. There are some municipalities and places where they're not allowing people to bring, for example, their own shopping bags into the stores. And we've been trying to eliminate plastic shopping bags over time that are a huge amount of waste. And there might be some things like that are temporary setbacks, but there's nothing within our broad goals that we're changing or reducing it at this point.
Great. So at a high level, this is something that you would never compromise, right? Yeah.
No.
Greg, I think the supply chain is going to be continuing to be global, but yet there were a lot of calls within even our politicians that says that we should bring more jobs back to the U.S. Look what happened when our masks were mostly produced in China, and we don't have enough masks, we don't have enough protective gears.
Right.
So bring more back, and this could be a tariff thing. It could also be a sentiment of security. Is Walmart rethinking about your global sourcing strategy at this time?
Well, first of all, on the tariff question, I mean, we're big believers we're against tariffs. We think protectionist measures end up hurting customers. I think, facing a significant global recession like we are right now would be the worst time to put in place higher levels of tariffs and any protectionist measures. So, because it's going to end up hurting the customers. So we'd be against that. We'd be vocal about that. In terms of our supply chain, we're always reassessing where we're buying goods from, and it's constantly shifting. We don't do it at a macro level, so we don't sit around, a few of us in a conference room, and say we want X percent to come from China and this percent to come from Mexico and this percent to come from the US. That's really not how we make sourcing decisions. It's at a buyer an item level where they're trying to figure out how can we offer the best value to our customers. And so because the decisions are made at that level, it's constantly shifting. And there's certain products like consumer electronics that are almost exclusively manufactured in China at this point, and that's the best place to source them from. So anyway, we're constantly surveying the world, looking for the best place to buy things. We still source around 2/3 of our goods in the U.S., so that's still the predominant share of our sourcing. But we're not making any decisions at a high level to say it should be more from this country or less from this country at this point.
Well, thank you, Brett. I wanted to raise a question to some students have just mentioned to me the other day, saying that M&A is perhaps cheap these days. A lot of retailers are in very tough positions, given that they are not as well endowed compared to Walmart, or maybe their business model is such that they cannot open during this time. Now, would this be an opportunity for Walmart to have some cheap assets to pick up, or you think about M&A in a different way as a company at a strategic level?
Yeah, I think the answer is maybe. In the U.S., it'd be really difficult for us to do a large, any kind of large acquisition that involves physical stores, just because of antitrust and competition and all that. But we're always evaluating the landscape. We tend to prefer more, sort of components of our business model or strategy that we're missing, and if we can go find a great team with a great product or technology, we tend to prefer those types of acquisitions. But if we're behind in certain areas, we're open to making acquisitions. That's what led to the Jet acquisition a few years ago, which really accelerated our e-commerce business. We didn't have a meaningful presence in India, and we made the Flipkart acquisition to really spur our efforts there. So we're always surveying the landscape, but I'm not sure. If there's a physical retailer that's going out of business, I'm not sure that's something that's going to be appealing to us.
Thank you. Yeah, Greg, I have a personal question to you. Yeah.
Sure.
So personally, as a chairman of such a big giant company, how much time do you need to worry about the execution level, operating level, or would you mostly focusing your time with the directors or the leadership on big picture, like how do you expand or how do you manage sustainability versus very detailed one? Because I heard that Walmart also is a company very good in execution, very good in operations, right? Yeah, and so this is a very interesting balance as a chairman. Are you also sometimes get dragged into issues like what is operating plan in the factory or in this particular warehouse at that time? Yeah, this is a personal question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and you know, the chairman role at companies differs pretty dramatically depending on the company and the individuals involved. For us at Walmart, we've had a history of, we've always had a Walton family member chair. So I'm married to Sam Walton's granddaughter, and I'm the third chairman in our history. And we've always had a professional CEO that's outside the family since Sam. So we're on our fifth CEO now in Doug McMillan. And then we've had a great tradition of our chairman working closely with the CEO. So my office in Arkansas is right next to his, and he and I talk every day. I tend to play a more active role probably than most chairmen, but that part of that's the history of how we've operated. And I like to stay focused on the big picture strategy, M&A, capital structure, significant executive hires, those types of things. That's where I think I can add the most value. But because of how our company operates, which you mentioned, if you don't understand the detail of how we're working, it's actually hard to add value on the bigger picture questions. So I usually spend, we've got something we call meeting week once a month, where we bring all of our senior executives from around the world, make sure everybody's in Arkansas for that week at our headquarters. And that's when we have our finance meeting, our M&A meeting, our officers meeting, real estate meetings. And so we have a series of meetings during that whole week that I attend as well. And that's where I make sure I really keep my pulse on what's happening in a more detailed level that then enables me to add value on the bigger picture questions.
Well, thanks, Greg. I think I want to use the remaining time to have students asking you questions directly.
Sure.
I see that Jenna is here. So Jenna, can you start?
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Greg. You'd mentioned already the stakeholder view and the business roundtable pledge that Walmart had been a signatory of. I was curious for a little bit more insight into how that pledge affects conversations at the board level and with shareholders during this time.
You know, it's interesting. Companies probably view that pledge in different ways. For us, that pledge, because that's how we've always operated, the pledge didn't actually, for us, it didn't make a significant difference in terms of how we act. So when we're having board conversations, or I'm talking, Doug and I are, making decisions, we don't ever really think about the pledge specifically, because it's so ingrained in our culture and how we operate. So we tend, I'm just thinking about recent conversations, when we've had to make trade-off decisions, let's just say it's a cash decision versus reputation or treating our associates right. I mean, we tend to, and our board is in alignment with us on this, we always come back to the question more around what's right for the long term. So if something's the right decision for the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 10 weeks, but it's not going to be good a year from now, we never make that decision. And it gets to another topic, which is it good to have a shareholder like our family that owns 50% of the business? And I'm a strong proponent of, I think it is, because it allows the management team and the board to have the confidence to make decisions that might not be right for a quarter, but are right for the long term. And a lot of companies talk about that, but when you get down to it and how decisions are actually made, a lot of times the incentives get skewed a bit, and we're fortunate to be in a position where we don't have to make that trade-off of sacrificing the long-term for short-term gain.
Very good. Thanks, Jenna. And thanks, Greg, for answering Jenna's question. I see Lorenz being next.
Yes. Thank you very much, Greg, also from my side. My question was around purchasing patterns and how you think they might change for the average American consumer as a result of this, not necessarily in the short term, so while COVID is happening, but what might this do to what people buy, how much they spend, how much they'll be saving. And I'd love to also understand how you as a business and as a strategy team think through a question like that. What sort of data do you use? Who do you engage to kind of come to a conclusion on this?
Mm-hmm. So on the latter question, we've always had incredible data around purchase behavior. We've tended to have less customer data, which may sound like kind of an obvious thing, but a lot of companies have really good customer data. We've always had really good purchase data, just based on how our systems work and transactions but anyway, so we would look to that data, and then it's really close partnerships with our suppliers is how decisions are made around categories shifting. It's interesting. I don't know, at this point, I don't know that there will be any dramatic shifts in categories based on this. I mean, there'll be some, as we talked about earlier, I think there will be behavioral shift in terms of how people purchase, but I'm not sure there will be significant category shifts based on this, at least not ones that we're seeing yet. But yeah, that could change. I mean, we're going to have a period of much lower demand just because of the unemployment levels, and so you'll see the impact of that with discretionary items, but that'll be a short to medium term phenomenon.
While we're on the subject of pattern of purchasing, I think Matt, you have a question that also is related to, in particular, food, right? Matt, can you jump in?
Yeah. Yes. Actually, I had two questions. One of them is bearing in mind the fact that the hospitality and the restaurants are closed right now. So the portion of the food industry that was catering to them, to a certain extent, is not accessed. How long do you think for food retailers or bigger retailers such as yourself, for them to be able to capture that market? Are you expecting inflationary movements in the food sector overall? And my third question is, because of this COVID crisis, do you expect a move to, do you expect a change in formats? Meaning, do you expect more people will be going to, formats such as Aldi? Will you be considering shifting your size? How are you going to be, do you think this is going to be part of your strategy or decision-making post-COVID?
Yeah, I'll address them in reverse order. So on the format question, I don't think it's going to lead to new formats, but as we talked about, I think it will accelerate certain trends. So another trend, which I didn't mention earlier, is department stores have been struggling, and this is going to be really difficult for those types of retailers to survive what's happening right now. And because we're going into a recession, the discount low cost retailers like an Aldi, Lidl, ourselves, Dollar General, they will naturally do better during this time period. In terms of inflation, we're not seeing it yet, but this is such a crazy time, and things are moving so fast. I mean, you saw what happened with oil this week. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next week and where the shortages might happen. If all of a sudden all the meat plants are down, you might see some spikes there, but we're not seeing anything dramatic at this point. And then for restaurants and, there had been a shift to more ready-made meals that had, another long-term trend that had been happening. It's interesting because part of this accelerates that, which is eating at home, but part of it is actually a negative because now people, like if you go to a grocery store, there are no ready-made, people aren't doing those types of things where you pick up prepared food anymore from grocery stores because those parts of the stores are all bare and shut down. So I don't know how that, I don't know whether this accelerates or decelerates that trend over time.
Thanks, Chair. Maybe we'll take the last question. Is that easy?
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time, Greg. I was wondering, you talked about that middle step that needs to happen before we reopen the economy properly. And given that there seems to be a somewhat disjointed approach on this, some states are opening up right now, some are not. How is a company like Walmart navigating this, and what sources of information do you rely on and trust in terms of formulating your policies around this?
So the answer is yes. We've had to essentially formulate our own policies, and then a lot of the retail industry has followed that. So our policy around leave, we were the first ones to provide PPE, the protective equipment for folks in the stores. Then the CDC mandated that. We started the social distancing and marking the stores. Now other retailers are doing that. So, everybody's learning at the same time, and we're reading as much as we can. We're talking to as many people as we can. We're talking to our suppliers. We're out in the stores, I go visit stores. All of our executives are visiting stores, talking to customers, talking to our associates. And it's again, how we learn. And then we have weekly meetings where right now they're virtual, but typically we come together every Friday in an auditorium and we talk about what we're seeing and hearing, and then we make decisions from there. And so our processes right now are just iterative based on that. But we don't have one sort, frankly, there just is not, nobody knows exactly what's happening. So if you read anybody who says, I know the answer, they don't know the answer, because nobody knows exactly how this is going to roll out. Nobody has perfect data. You've seen all the models, all the predictive models out there, but they're predictions based on very limited testing. And I think we're going to see, we've got case studies of how different countries are approaching this. Different states will approach it in varying ways, and we're just going to continue to learn and adapt as quickly as we can. But we don't have a blueprint yet for exactly how that's going to work.
So I hope you all join me in thanking Greg for spending time with us. So we really appreciate it.